And, well, then that brings me on to Hazel, because my twin sister was a secretary in London, as was Hazel, and they knew each other. And Hazel said, I'm going out to Aden. Now, it's a funny thing, Hazel's, I have to say, her geography is not her strong point. And she had a sort of boyfriend in Nigeria, wasn't it? And she thought that somehow Aden would be on the way to Nigeria. Well, it's pretty much two sides of a triangle. But anyway, so there was a way in which...
Can I just say, geographically, I'm with Hazel.
Well, if you were a wing commander or above out there with young children, the Air Force, in its generosity, it said you could have an English nanny.
Okay.
So Hazel had this friend from
only for 2 months.
Devonshire, was it? And so Hazel was flown out at RAF expense,
Because
and
my boyfriend had left, you see.
we met him later, and he'd already married someone else, so it was all totally amicable. But anyway, so my twin sister, Judy, wrote to me and said, look, my friend Hazel Templar is coming out. Would you look after? And I have to say, my initial reaction was, well, I'm not sure I can make time to fit a girl into my schedule. I'm pretty busy scubaing and all, but I'll try. So I turned up at the airport and picked up this pale-faced girl in the middle of an English winter. And I said, okay, I'll drive you back to the Wing Commander's quarters, and then I'll call for you at 3 o'clock and we're going scuba diving. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. So
Never done it.
never done it.
No.
And so off we went, and I took her. I owned a little, it was a little Fiat then, wasn't it? And we drove off to a place where I'd made friends with the Arab fishermen, and we went off in a boat to this lovely reef, a little island. We called it the Blue Grotto, didn't we? And we landed there, and I just strapped the scuba onto Hazel's back and said, you put this in your mouth and you breathe and follow me. It was almost like that.
That was my training.
And we swam around this lovely reef and saw grouper and lionfish and moray eels, and it was just fabulous. No, we didn't see any sharks that day. I hadn't even told her about sharks. And I thought, this is really rather fun. Hazel loved it, and she was great company. So then she said, must have been a Monday or something, she said, could we meet up on Wednesday evening? And I said, well, it's a problem there, Wednesday evening special. And she said, why? And I said, because Wednesday evening is the only half an hour of the week when the British Forces broadcasts classical music, your 100 best tunes type of thing. And she said, oh, that's all right. I love classical music too. So I said, okay, we'll meet up. We'll go out to a beach in the moonlight with my little transistor radio and listen to classic music and have a swim in the moonlight. And we did. And I suddenly thought, this is really rather good friendship, you know.
It says here, the actual words, these are your words, fell in love.
Fell in love, absolutely. Well, yeah, when I got home, we were very old-fashioned, I mean, you know, and so when I took her home that evening, I think I remember saying to her, do you mind if I kiss you? Anyway, so we did, and then, amazingly, I took her flying up country. Up country was into the hinterland, to the border of Yemen, who were trying to infiltrate and take over Aden, which they later did. And so we were at war, technically, with the Yemen. And I flew Hazel up to one of these sand airstrips up in the mountains. It was really pretty exciting stuff, wasn't it, love? And when we were there, an army intelligence officer who was stationed up there, sort of gathering intelligence on what the Yemenis were doing, came up to us to meet the aeroplane, and Hazel said, Derek, what are you... It was her cousin from Devon. It was an extraordinary small world. And then when Hazel wandered off to look at one of these sort of Beau Geste forts, a bit like Foreign Legion, it was all made of sand and mud, but painted, whitewashed, and quite impressive, really. And Derek came up to me and he said, because Hazel's younger sister had already got married by then, he said, Tim, you really ought to do something about getting Hazel married. And I said, that's okay, Derek, I'm working on it. and a few days later, I had to do a trip to Kenya with the Beverley, and I took Hazel along with me. Well, actually, when I turned up to fly that morning, a rather bossy air movements officer said, Lieutenant Cripps, I'm afraid you, because I had already told him I wanted to take Miss Templar with me, he said, there's no room on the aeroplane, you've got 90 passengers, and that's it. So I looked at him and I said, that's not a problem. She will come as what's called supernumerary crew, the jump seat.
Okay, yeah, the jump seat, yeah.
So she sat in the cockpit with me all the way down to
Is that the
Kenya.
photograph that we had?
That's a picture of her flying. Well, that was a picture of me flying. That's a picture of her flying, yeah.
Yeah.
So I put her in the cockpit seat.
So Hazel, you a trained pilot as well?
No, not at all. In fact, I'm not very good at all. But I can turn the map, so...
Well, no, sometimes we used to see that lovely little plane over there.
Yeah.
That was my private aeroplane. And when I took Hazel on flights with me, sometimes I'd have to unfold a big map, and it was more convenient if I said, look, Hazel, you just hang on to the stick, will you, and keep it level. So she'd do while I sorted the map out. But so she had a cousin in Kenya who was a coffee planter, wasn't she?
Yeah.
So we somehow arranged that she would stay with him, and I had to bring the aeroplane back from Nairobi, and then I had to wait about 3 weeks because I had to, being demonstration crew, I had to demonstrate the aeroplane in a flying display at Aden. And when I'd done that, I then took leave, and I flew back down to Nairobi, and in the meantime, Hazel had had a wonderful time. She'd been all over the place, been down
I've been down to Mombasa.
on a bus with
On a bus.
Maasai warriors, you
Yeah.
tell her,
On a bus, yes, with these warriors. They were standing there on the bus stop and with huge great spears. and they climbed in just behind me. And I kept thinking, oh dear.
She was pretty
I
adventurous.
don't know why I went.
Well, then you came back up to Nairobi at the appointed time and we met, and a different crew took the aeroplane back, and I headed off with Hazel in my Land Rover. I bought a Land Rover for £100, Mark I, simple little Land Rover. Had 3 spare wheels, which we used to say chaperoned us.
You need. Yeah.
Because we had 2 Lilos, airbeds, down either side of the Land Rover, and that's where we slept. And we set off from Nairobi. We went round the north of Lake Victoria, right down completely beyond the south of Lake, to the Congo, to the Congo. And then all the way back.
It was beautiful.
Interesting. We went to treetops. We stayed in the hotel which Queen Elizabeth was in.
When she found out.
Went to Murchison Falls and Queen Elizabeth National Park, and it was just a brilliant holiday, wasn't it, darling? You just no passport worries or terrorist worries, anything. Just marvellous scenery.
Any of it now.
No,
Couldn't.
no, you're not with.
So, I mean, here we are in 2021, and how old were you both then?
Yeah, 25, 24,
Yeah.
something
Yeah,
like that.
25.
24,
Married
25.
27.
So but it's clearly a very fond memory and great memories of that nation. And
Well, I'll tell you a little story, which I wrote to Classic FM once because they wanted romantic stories. And on the last day of our safari, we'd been 5,000 miles in this little Land Rover. We got back to Nairobi, and I arranged to have the Land Rover flown back up to Aden, things you could do with Air Force money.
And I went on a boat, a lovely boat.
Well, yeah, but that was from Aden. But we went. I took her into a record shop in Nairobi, air-conditioned, lovely shop, and I said, "Please, may we listen to our favourite piece of music, Paganini's First Violin Concerto, gorgeous."
Yeah.
And I explained, because Hazel by now knew that she had to, her sort of contract was ending, she had to go back to England, and I knew it was going to be a pretty painful separation. So I told her the true story that I'd read on the record sleeve, that Paganini depicted in the final movement the solo violin being the plaintive cry of a prisoner in the dungeon, and the bass was the jailer slamming the great door of the dungeon. And the plaintive cry of the violin was saying, "Do not leave me." Poor Hazel burst into tears.
You're a very romantic man.
Yeah, he is.
You're a very romantic man. That's lovely. So I think we're going to bring this episode. Let's make this episode number 1 because we've barely scratched the surface. Yeah, but thank you so much, Tim, for sharing those memories, and Hazel, thank you very much for making sure that Tim doesn't say anything out of order on the side. But it's lovely to hear your story, and let's arrange to meet again because this is fabulous. Fabulous.